Hello and welcome. This is another form of Try&Fly. I call it quick look now. The idea is that instead of showing you the complete flight, which can take between an hour and 20 to almost 2 hours, depending on the add-on I'm testing, quick look is just giving you scenes with, let's say, noteworthy facts about the aircraft I'm flying. And so the plan is to use this kind of format whenever, for example, I retest a known aircraft, or if an aircraft is so predictable that just certain topics are of interest, and I'm trying to kind of thin down those Try&Fly videos because I know some of you, and actually I have to add myself here, we don't always want to watch 1 hour and a half or 2 hours of video to learn more about the specialities of an add-on. So this is trying to do kind of both, give you enough information, hopefully, and keep it as brief as possible. All right, into the cockpit then. Very quickly, this is the standard Laminar A330, which has come out from the start with XP12. Originally, as usual, when Laminar does something like an Airbus, you can see that the quality of the modeling inside and outside is quite good. So they don't give us some shoddy work there, on the contrary. But this aircraft was only doing as if it is an Airbus. It has a Boeing style, or it had a Boeing style FMC, and yeah, the fly-by-wire and all that is okay. It's doing its job, kind of, but you were flying basically an X-plane standard aircraft. Now, just recently, 12.05 has been released, made public. There were some beta phases, and looking through the release notes, I realized that this aircraft has received quite a few updates and modifications, and most of them aim at making this a bit more Airbus-like than it was before. I can tell you already, yep, they have made it a bit more like an Airbus now. You can get the impression, if you kind of half close your eyes and don't look very closely, it is a bit more feeling, Airbus feeling there than it used to be. I had already 3 or 4 flights. Interestingly, only the first one went without a hitch. The second and third one, yeah, there were all kinds of issues, partially probably caused by myself, maybe a plug-in combination. Yeah, it was sketchy, but let's see how I will fare on this flight. Now, I will not show you all the normal operation here, the standard operating procedures, firing up an Airbus, because I'm assuming that you have flown an Airbus before. It's a quick look, okay? So I'm not going to go through all the details of firing up this aircraft. But I will show you what is really the most interesting one. That's the FMC and how to program it. And then during the flight, if there's anything worth noteworthy, I will let you know. By the way, this aircraft always comes in a cold and dark, unless you select the engine running option. And yeah, you have a shitload of buttons to press to bring it into a non-cold and dark mode. One thing also that's definitely need to know is whenever you're stopped, not parking brake, but whenever you're stopped, you will have external power. And there's another thing quite important for you to know. if you save a situation and then restore it with this Airbus, you shouldn't do that, because there seems to be still an issue with saving situations and restoring them in general, as far as I read, but also this aircraft will be all over the place if you do. You will not really be able to get it into something that is doing its job. I had one of my botched flights was due to that, I'm pretty sure. So it's best to really start from scratch and do all the steps. By the way, another thing that's interesting to know, see that? It really does a nice fire test with the synoptics here in the upper display. So quite well done. Yeah, now I will continue pressing lots of buttons. Right, so I pressed all the buttons and here we go. By the way, the ideas, that's more or less fake. So there isn't really there doesn't seem to be an ideas initialization cycle or anything like that. So alignments and stuff, things are immediately fully available. So that's a simplification. Don't forget, this is still a standard aircraft, and they made it look even a bit more also inside like an Airbus, but it's not an Airbus, as you might know from the flight factor or TOLIS or on MSFs from the Phoenix, for example, or fly-by-wire. You will not get the same level of depth, system depth, that you would expect. By the way, we have 42 frames, that's bad. I actually did the 54 gigabyte scenery update. Not that it has improved things drastically, but it seems to have done, from the look, the view, it's actually improved it a bit, the scenery, I mean, because I think I had the original beta initial scenery, and that was a reduced one as far as I understood. So now I have kind of the official full scenery. You can also see, depending on where you are in the cockpit, also where you look, your frames will fluctuate, but that's explained. And forget the flicker. I mean, we're used to it now. We know that that's an issue in XP12. Now, this is actually the most prominent change that you will also see, and it's the FMC. They have adapted the layout to be more like an Airbus and not some kind of warped Boeing style MCDU. I can tell you already it's done quite well, but there are still Boeing genes somewhere hidden in this whole thing. You will also see later with the autopilot. Anyway, let's, I haven't updated my nav graph yet. Yeah, I know, I have to do it. So, but ignore that, go to the init page. That's now like Airbus, okay? And you start by defining where to, from to where you want to fly. Give it some flight number. You see alignment and stuff like that isn't here yet. I know that I'm going to fly in flight level 140, so I'll do that. Next page. Here you can just press the button. It will fill in the values. So we have 15.6 tons of fuel and we have 139 tons of zero fuel weight. We're relatively light. Gross weight is 154.9. As I said, that's light. Okay, so that's the init page, and the next that you would do is setting up your flight plan. You can already see the two airports here, so let's click on Munich. Let's quack. Go back to init, and let's do it correctly this time. I hope that this will not mess up things now, because my experience with that is, yeah, be careful with doing changes. Deleting waypoints also didn't work well, yet. Don't forget, I mean, maybe Laminar keep telling us that this is a final version B. This is not. This, for me, is still a pre-release of X-Plane. There are so many things that are not yet finished and done. So there are some issues also around FMCs. This is one of them. If you delete waypoints, I had some really strange things happening to me. So it's best to cleanly get your flight plan set up or use a file from SimBrief or so to load your flight plan. At least at the moment, it appears that messing around in your flight plan might actually give you some trouble later on. All right, so let's hope we haven't messed in a bad way. Okay, insert temporary, and then it would put whatever it had in the temporary scratch pad sort of area. So this is all correct. Now you can go on the arrival airport if you already know. You should try and maybe set up some approach. I'm not sure how it will react if you don't. Yeah, usually what I do is if I don't know exactly, I go by SimBrief, for example. I set up only the approach, and then during the flight, when I know more about arrivals and stuff like that, I can also set up the arrival during flight. I haven't tried that yet, but normally with this default FMC in X-Plane, this should work. So why? Oh no, that's actually correct. Yeah. So let's see. Magat. Yeah. Who doesn't know my Try&Fly scenarios? This is my special flight plan. It's actually correct the way we do it. To get rid of this, just use the clear key, and then again, you can always reverse your changes by doing the erase. Or like I do now, because everything is as it should be, I set it up. Now, next thing that you can do is, that you switch your display. Actually, I can't show you that here. So let's do it like this. Plan. By the way, there's another setting, eng, that seems to be something that big Airbuses seem to have nowadays. And then you can use the arrow keys and you can kind of follow your flight plan and check your flight plan. So we've done that. Yeah, it's not gone. By the way, you can use the airport key to jump to the other airport. In this case, it just jumps on this page. Okay, fair enough. Performance. It would be the next one. You can also check the fuel prediction, by the way. But there isn't yet a prediction. Okay. I have to see. What it tells us here is that we have 15.6 tons on board, and that is, well, according to this, route reserve 5%, final time 30 minutes, so it's kind of the basic time, but it hasn't really calculated anything. Secondary flight plan is not working, ATC-COM is not working, NAVRAT, you shouldn't actually need this page in an Airbus under normal circumstances, because it will set all the frequencies for you, and that usually also works. At least on my flights, that was something that definitely worked. Yeah, there's also data, but most of that stuff is not really usable. So let's go to performance. Again, some simplifications here. By the way, there is no approach mode for the performance. It will activate something like the approach mode with the speeds and all somehow automatically. every time you press the perf button, you will end on the takeoff runway, on the takeoff page, and then you have to kind of go through the next phases as you need it. The transition altitude thingy doesn't seem to work. I'm going to enter 5,000 manually, but the indications I get on the display always seem to indicate that it may be actually using 18,000 internally. This could still be a bug, or I'm just too stupid. Could be, who knows. By the way, if you need these, if you need speeds, it will not calculate them for you. But now thinking of it, there is a VAS airplane toolbox. That's a freeware for X-plane aircraft. Let me quickly fire this up. Yeah, so the VAS airplane toolbox is something you get on forum explain.org, and it's basically a program that runs. It is kind of a little web server, so all the calculating stuff happens inside the external program, and then you can go to your browser. In this case, it's port 8080. And you can select from a variety of profiles. This thing has been growing over quite some time now, at least 2 years, I think it exists already. And they have added more and more profiles. It's X-plane only, but I would say it may not be the most accurate, because obviously it's always a problem to get the correct data. But if you have this, what we could do now is we could load the aircraft as it says. If you do have a SimBrief account and calculated a flight, you can use the ACARS button. I'm just going to go directly to the takeoff page, and then I need to select the airport, which is Stuttgart. It loads the weather, the real weather. I'm going to force runway 07. And the good thing is I can change this. Wind. Oh. What's that? Allowed wind format is XXYYZZ. Oh, okay, so 35601. Save. The takeoff weight is, we set 154. We're going to use flaps config 1 plus F, and we're going to use, well, it is possible to use flex, but to be honest, I'm not sure that this really works. So I'm going to go toga. Temperature is, I think that's correct. Anti-ice is off, and the packs and bleeds stay on. Okay, and then you can go here to calculate, and it will give you flaps config 1 for 154 tons. Gives you 110 to 128, 133. Well, why don't we use that? We shall see if that works. What was the other one? 133. Mm-hmm. Now, flaps, I'm going to use 1. Again, all this trimming stuff, I'm not sure that this is actually fully implemented. You can put something in there in the usual way, such as, for example, up. And I look at a little table here. Let me go to see if we, or what. That's 2.8 centimeters. What's that supposed to be? Center of gravity. Let's assume that we're in the middle of things, which would give us a trim of around up 3.0. Again, this is completely thumbs in the air. You can provide a flex temperature here, and it will offer you a flex temp setting, but the thing is, you put your throttle lever into that detent, and then it will change to manual climb very quickly. It's not exactly as I know it from Airbuses, but there you go. It's an adaptation, or yeah, they try to get closer to that. Managed, actually, I have been testing. You can change the speed during climb and descent. It will keep that speed. It's a bit more difficult than in the next phase because you can't enter knots here. You have to give it a Mach number. Because we are not very high, I'm going to not touch this, okay? And here's back with /250. You could actually reduce the speed again. Actually, for the descent, I will do this because otherwise we might be a bit too fast. And then comes the landing phase. Apart from the fact that it will not give you... What happens if I enter it like this there? Nope. So temperature 12. Oh, is it only 12 degrees? Oh, well. I think it takes these values from the weather because there's always something in here. Transition altitude 6,000. Should be transition level really, but it doesn't matter. Approach speed 140 and landing speed 135. Yeah. If you're not sure what to take, so for example, if I have no idea, usually what I do is I take the slat retraction speed S and deduct 20, roughly. By the way, the same is for here. If I don't know what to do, I would normally take the slat retraction speed and then deduct something like 20. In this case, it would be a bit more than we have been calculated here, but that's it's just roughly to have a value. What you also could do is you could actually take the F flap retraction speed as a V2, for example, and then work your way down by deducting something like 6 to 8 knots from V2, and that gives you V1 and VR. It's just, it has nothing to do with realistic things. Just that's how I normally do it. If I have any indication of roughly where the speed should be. Right, and that's practically it. On the other pages, you have the usual, a lot of fake stuff as well, and that's basically it with the MCDU. The most noteworthy change that we have. I'm now going to go through the whole starting up and checklist and all that. I'm not going to show you this because this is like with any other Airbus. Yeah, you just do your normal steps, getting pushed back, and yeah, we'll be back when there's something that I can show you. Yeah, a quick look at the outer model here. Oops. As I say, Laminar does good job on the modeling in general, so the visual parts of the aircraft are quite well done, are definitely in brackets payware level. And yeah, I'm just firing up the right engine at the moment. I have a feeling that you can't hear that much from the engines, but yeah. Strikes me actually as a bit of odd, but maybe that's a sound setting thing. I need to check. Okay, we're just finished now with the pushback. Auto start checklist. Anti-ice is not required. Ecam status checked, so it's all green. No errors. Pitch trim is... oh yeah, we need to check that. Um, 3.6. I think we need to use just the normal trim stuff to bring this to what we set up as 3.0. Let's also quickly do the flight controls check. Full up, full down, neutral, full left, full right, neutral. Rudder, normally you would then switch off here but that's not working. The pedal disconnect. Otherwise it would interfere. For left, for right, neutral. Other way around, the other left. Right, so flight controls is checked. By the way, these pages are quite well done. So you can switch. Practically all of them have good looking synopsis here. It's all looking pretty good. And the thing is, if you turn it off later on, it will always go into the ride mode. So that's what Airbuses also do. So that's also quite well done. We can see now that the auto brake is still missing. We need to bring it to max. And shortly before takeoff, we're going to press the takeoff config just to make sure that everything is as it should be for takeoff. Also, that is like you would do in other Airbuses. Right, I'm going to taxi now to the runway. And then we're going to see on the runway. Okay, just on the runway now, being prepared for takeoff. Flight controls checked, flight instruments checked, briefing confirmed, flap settings is config 1 plus F. Flap V1 128, rotating at 128. Yeah, it's showing us the 128. V2 134, I think it was. Flex temperature is 42, but we're going to do manual toga. ATC set ICA memo. Yep, we haven't done that yet, so takeoff config. Checked. Takeoff no blue. Cabin crew advised. Engine start selector stays on off. Oops, yep, normal, I mean. And the packs, they stay on. So that's what it looks up here. Right, we're ready. Now for the takeoff, what you do is you bring the thrust levers forward and it will show you thrust lever. There is this manual flex, but as I say, it will change very quickly. I'm going to do man toga, because I don't have the feeling that it makes a big difference. V1, rotate. It doesn't show the rotation speed. And then typical Airbus fly-by-wire, you kind of bring the two bars of your flight director by giving input. And flaps up, gear up. I should have called in for the gear a bit earlier. And then autopilot 1. Yeah, and as you see, there is no, you have to bring the thrust back to thrust climb. Okay, so it's the CL, detent, and there it is now, and that's what you will keep during the flight. And that's the takeoff. Very simple. I'll be back when we are before the top of descent. Yeah, and I can tell you already that we have a problem. And I'm not sure how I produced it this time. But that's what I'm telling you. There is still some issues here. Normally, when you put in the arrival, it should have set 5,000 as a constraint here. It didn't do that. Also, it appears that it does not. You see, the altitude is missing. By the way, it's not normal that this wheel turns all the time in an Airbus, but that's again some. So something did not work out again on the flight plan. And the problem is that I can also, it says 5,000 here. But it will not put it in. Okay. So there's nothing I can do at the moment. It sometimes works and sometimes not. And that's now the problem because we don't have a top of descent. Normally it would show... Oh, and we have another problem, and that seems to be in combination with this issue. The speed is far too low. So it's calculating some speed that's not correct. So the whole thing did not work. Again, I had flights where this was no problem, and now we seem to have one that has a problem. When I'm roughly at the top of descent that we usually have, I'll be back. And here we go, another issue. Do not mess with the flight plan. That's exactly now what happened again. Is I tried to kind of recover, and what happened was it tried to fly back to Abtal. I had to use the direct page to force it now back to Magat. As you can see, we've kind of veered off to the left. It's not very good. So it's best not to mess with your flight plan at the moment. Yeah, not sure if we can now see if we can now enter the it says 5,000 plus. What? Yeah, but it doesn't end up here. So we have a star there, which seems to indicate that there is a constraint, but yeah, can't change it. Anyway, we are 48 miles from Magat, so since we don't have any choice, what I'm going to do now in a moment is I will use the open descent to 5,000, and then I will use the vertical speed mode and put it on roughly 17 to 1800 feet per minute. So yeah, I'm going to do that in a moment. Okay, so I pressed here on the open descent, and then I clicked here and then selected 1700 feet per minute. Speed is still 250. Interestingly, oh yeah, okay. Looks like we are 260. So we're a bit faster. We have idle thrust. Alright then. Let's see what happens when we are getting closer to Magat. Okay, so we are 12 miles from Magat. I was a little bit over anxious on the descent, so we'll reach 5,000 right now. That's okay though, because it's actually very difficult to slow down this aircraft. And I have selected now the clean dot, the green dot speed, which is the clean speed, to be ready then for the approach. Now, one thing that you shouldn't do is don't activate the approach mode here, the ILS approach mode, too early, because it will then start doing funny things. So I wait that I'm just a very small number of miles from Magat before I turn that on. And I also wait that I see the glide slope kind of moving. That's when I then turn on the approach mode here on the FCU. Most likely we're not going to be able to do an auto land today again, I think. I'm also not sure when it will activate the approach phase here. It's not like in a normal Airbus, that's for sure. Let's do the auto brake 1, because in my last flight I actually forgot. And assuming that I hopefully won't need it, I arm the speed brake. Lights are on. Now I show you what happens when you activate the approach phase. Now you see it'll start turning ever so slightly and kind of sets itself up then for intercepting. Shouldn't really do it like that. It should actually wait that the indicator is moving, but it's not too bad. The first time I did this, I did it a bit further away from Magat, and I was a bit confused by the reaction. You can see that the glide slope is armed. The localizer is already in green mode. I would expect it to be armed and not in green mode, but there you go. As I say, we don't have a fully blown Airbus system here. And now I'm going to manually bring down the speeds. And first stage of flaps. And to see if we can slow down the aircraft. By the way, when it starts intercepting the ILS, you get the Boeing kind of thing. Your heading becomes manual. That's not what a normal Airbus would do. So we're on the localizer on the glide slope, we're descending, but unfortunately we are also accelerating. So one thing you can do is bring out the gears a little bit earlier maybe than you would do normally, because that'll help slowing it down. Our approach speed is 140. Again, that stuff here is not what you would normally do in an Airbus. Well, I use a bit of speed brake because we need to get down to the speed. Flaps 2, you see why. Flaps 3. Flaps full. Now we have to rearm the spoiler. And let's see if we can do auto land. Oh, this time we can. Well, then I'll let it do the job. Let's see. I've done now several flights, and not two flights were running exactly the same. In the last flight where I had the issue with the FMC that I showed you, I wasn't able to arm the auto land. This time I can. Well, anyway, landing checklist, cabin crew advised, auto throttle is speed ICA memo, landing no blue. Yep. Let's see what it does. Now the actual landing speed would be 132.
1,000.
But it doesn't have any management of speeds that I can see, so we let it approach with 140, and then we can maybe shortly before the landing we can bring it down to 132. Again, you shouldn't need to do this.
500.
Let's see what it does. And don't look at the flicker hell here. That's just XP12 for you.
300 above. $200 minimum.
It's doing the approach pretty well.
50, 40, 30, 20, retard, 10, retard, 5.
So auto brake is active, decel. Then let's do manual braking. Yeah, it stopped pretty quickly, I guess. Oh, and turn off the autopilot. It's quite important before you start steering, because on Autoland it will send you all over the place if you don't. One keeps forgetting this. I'm trying to remember, should the Autoland not turn off the autopilot itself, but at this stage it has this kind of follow the runway mode, and if you then try and steer it away, it gets all over the place because it's trying to recover the runway heading. Okay, so let's bring in all the stuff. I'm not going to taxi to the runway. Quick look. We're on a good way. I think there are still some fixes that they need to do to some aspects of the autoflight system, because it is a little bit unreliable, and especially when you start messing in the flight plan, things can get pear-shaped. Oh, I forgot to actually. Yeah, well, we have 1013 anyway. Otherwise, I think this aircraft feels a bit more like an Airbus now. It flies okay. Manual flying is also not bad. And as you've seen, the Autoland is actually pretty good. Try and do that yourself. At least at the beginning, it might be a little bit difficult to do that. Flight director is off as well. Yeah, there are some things that I don't know from Airbus that are probably more Boeing style. Still the genes from the default aircraft, but I think they've done a pretty good job in emulating and making it feel a little bit more than an Airbus. Okay, that's it. I hope the 45 minutes, we're just in the time frame that I set myself for the quick looks. I hope that was helpful. Until next time.